Greetings world. We are on DK. Today we will discuss the United Nations, the government force of the New World Order. We know the elite use two rulers for all things. We discussed this in detail in the document Hell, the Bloodlines. For thousands of years the elite have always had a public ruler, a king, or president, and a private and much more powerful ruler who is over the public puppet. The priest, the pope, the spiritual ruler. The spiritual ruler was always the one with the most privacy and ability to control behind the scenes. The governing ruler only carries out what the spiritual ruler demands. He is a puppet, a poster child. As we have explained before, this system is used in all areas of society today. In military this is easily evident. The military general is under command and final word of the military chaplain. This is the same with the Vatican and the United Nations. And even within the United Nations and the Vatican itself, the public face is always the puppet ruler. The Vatican, the White Pope, is the elite's world public spiritual ruler. There are always layers. That is how deception works. However, the elite love to laugh at us, leaving us little breadcrumbs and clues everywhere they are. They use signs and symbols, hand gestures, code words, which we have pointed out before. But also the Masonic Jesuit elite who rule us, use colors and flags to identify themselves and label what they own and more. The colors symbolically significant in Masonry are purple, red, white, black, green, yellow, violet and blue. You will see they are the same as the colors of the Cabal. Somewhere over the Masonic rainbow, the only pot of gold to be found is given to you by the Rothschilds. Deception. And they always hide under the guise of peace. It is no coincidence that a rainbow is a symbol of peace and has been twisted and used by the elite for deception. You must see these things, and link them together. You must awaken and see the bigger picture for yourself. We hope spelling it out from time to time will help you apply it to everything you allow into your mind. The flag of the United Nations we can see is white and blue. Blue is the supreme color of Masonry. The ancient high priests and druids wore blue robes. Babylonians clothed their idols in blue. Blue was the symbol of perfection to the Hebrews, to the Druids the symbol of truth, to the Chinese the symbol of deity, and to the medieval Christians it was the symbol of immortality. Blue is the symbol always revered above all others by the Masons as the color of enlightenment. The second color of the United Nations flag is white. White symbolizes purity, righteousness. These colors are used for the top of the pyramid. Make the connections. See the big picture. The people who rule us live by oath. They swear allegiance. Everything they do is controlled by their oath. They have no free will. They rule us under oath and command of those higher than them, in sworn silence, on pain of death, and worse than death. They are under command of the order, and the symbols they use have significant meaning to them. as they should to you. But they keep you from looking into it, so you stay blind. The Secretary General of the United Nations is the public governing ruler under command of the White Pope, the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, whom we discussed previously, explaining his move from the UN to take presidency of South Korea, has left his seat available. January 1, 2017. It has been filled by Antonio Guterres, former refugee agency chief. This is a 5-year position. Guterres, in his first address as UN Secretary General, made his point clear. This is to be a year of peace. We have discussed this peace before. False peace. We will look into him further in future videos. People still wonder today how the Nazis took over control of Germany. We see them doing it today. If you notice, the United Nations was set up after the dissolution of the Nazi force, under the name of peace. As you see, the elite are very smart. The Nazis in Germany simply created the problem. The public had the expected reaction. So, the elite gave us the solution they intended to implement from the start. They follow the same script and rinse, repeat. So once the United Nations was established, what to do with the Nazis? They were integrated into America, to continue their work on an easily isolated continent, spreading their experiments and running the government, to one day, when the world was more ready for one world order, place it under the control of the United Nations. This was no small task. The elite make their plans for decades in advance. Every move is planned, detailed. USA pays half of UN yearly income. Due to recent events involving Obama not using his veto to rescue Israel in UN bills, Congress just passed a bill to cut the funding to United Nations if they do not start playing nice with Israel. The UN owns billions of acres of American soil, thanks to Obama, who sold off millions of acres of land, public and private, to large corporations like the BLM and other non-governmental organizations, as well as designated more hundreds of millions of acres of land as national monuments. Not to mention China's land grabs. However, what this selling and designating of land does, is the locations become a part of the World Heritage under international treaty, which place them under control of the UN. We exposed Jade Helm to you and FEMA and the plans to create a police state under control of the United Nations. We exposed the side operations for this agenda, which included the race war, which Obama brought about with the help of George Soros, drone kills on civilians without trial, indefinite detention without trial. Obama has made complete lists including details on all U.S. citizens, lists of those who are to be instantly exterminated upon the United Nations official takeover, lists of citizens who are to be immediately put in re-education camps provided by the United Nations FEMA, and lists of citizens who will be willing slaves to the new totalitarian system. The forced microchip implantation of those already being rounded up by the American government today. We exposed this in 2014, now it is in place. The United Nations World Police, called the Strong Cities Network, not Safe Cities Network or Serene Cities Network, but Strong, are now in full authority of the USA. The American police and military are now under command of the United Nations, not the American government. The Strong Cities Network, also known as the World Police, recently launched into action by Loretta Lynch. America is a world police state of the New World Order. The education system of United Nations Agenda 21, which has been used in North Korea and China for decades, known as Common Core, has been put together and implemented in the schools of America now. The name says it all. It is designed to take away free thought and imagination, replacing it with a cold core just like everyone else's. So we will all be common. The same inside. Dead. The schools, just like the churches, must follow the United Nations agenda and teach only their curriculum or they are closed. We address the American issues as they are most drastic, The United Nations has already taken these steps to completion in Europe, Scandinavia and many other places. The control of the internet now belongs to United Nations domain company ICANN. Shall we expect it to be renamed to ICANN soon? Already censorship is on the rise full speed ahead. Obama's legacy, should he be granted one, is that he gave the country away to the New World Order. Barry Obama has created division and hate in every area of society. Race, religion, creating identity crisis, which folds nicely into United Nations agenda for trans society. Depopulation, violence and hate are on the rise, as well as the additives in the chemtrails and fluoride and lead in the water. The citizens are almost ripe for the plucking. But the guns, the final step is left unfinished. Much to Obama's dismay. But at this point, any event could create the civil war. The people are so deranged and hyper. The economy collapse. And that would take care of that. We have seen it all before. History repeats and repeats because it is the same damn elites we allow to control us continuously. And still no one gives a shit. Sheep for the slaughter. So regardless of what happens in America, the United Nations is well on the move. So let us take a look. For those who do not know the United Nations, let us take a bit of a journey through history and find out about this den of wolves. See between the lines. Realize the terms the elite use to deceive you. They care nothing for you. They want you dead. They want you controlled entirely. They invert everything. They are deceivers. So let us first look briefly at more of their symbolism. How about the mural that engulfs the United Nations Conference Hall?
United Nations headquarters, which was built in 1945 and financed largely by John D. Rockefeller. Inside UN headquarters is an ominous meditation room. The custodian of the meditation room is Lucis Trust Company. At one time, the Lucis Trust was located at 666 United Nations Plaza and was formerly named Lucifer Publishing Company. The Rockefeller-funded UN Meditation Room is 33 feet long and 18 feet wide. 18 feet is 6 plus 6 plus 6. The small, dimly lit, windowless room was built in the shape of a pyramid that is laying on its side. At the center of the room is a 4-foot-high, black, casket-shaped stone slab which weighs 6.5 tons and is extremely magnetic and rests on a concrete pillar. The pillar descends beneath the floor into the bedrock and taps into the Earth's hyperdimensional energies to induce a state of altered consciousness. Not far from the meditation room is the United Nations Security Council chamber. This is the emergency room of the UN, where the world leaders meet when there is a threat to peace. They decide the fate of nations. The central focus of the UN mural is the phoenix bird that has risen. The phoenix bird is a symbol of Lucifer. Egyptians believed that the phoenix symbolized a god who rose to heaven in the form of a morning star like Lucifer after his fire immolation of death and rebirth. Notice that the phoenix bird is not standing above his own ashes. He is standing above his old skin. Like a snake, he has shed his old skin and is revealing himself as God at the center of the mural. At the top left, there is a church steeple without a cross. The missing cross symbolizes the death of Christianity. Below, a woman receives the rays of the sun god, while the man in front of her plays Pan's flute. To their right are two pyramid symbols and people joined together by a long blue serpent-like cloth. Below the risen phoenix, a sword is driven through a dragon beast. This represents the killing of old beliefs and religions that depicted Lucifer as a beast. The New World religion worships him as beautiful. Behind the phoenix, the ghostly figures of the walking dead are stepping into a void. They symbolize depopulation. On the right panel, the pale horse from the book of Revelation is the bringer of death to humanity through weapons, hunger, and disease. The man is releasing him. The chained black man represents slavery, while the top panel of the mural shows a technologically advanced white race who control industry, art, and science. In this post-apocalyptic mural, the military man standing on the tail of the beast represents worldwide military power. He tips his helmet to the elite, who are climbing out from underground cities where they safely hid from the apocalypse. In the main oval panel above the phoenix bird, a woman is holding flowers. She is the bride in a wedding ceremony. Who are these newlyweds that are kneeling submissively beneath the serpent in the overhead tree? The general message of the UN's Phoenix Rising mural is that humanity is stepping into a new Luciferic reality. Beneath this disturbingly prophetic mural, world leaders make global decisions that affect the lives of nearly 7 billion people.
Now that you know signs and symbols have much more detailed and important meanings, you are now aware of how the elite communicate to and identify each other. The elite do not have to be so secretive as they once were in years past. They hide in view of us all, though they live by oath of secrecy, carrying out their plans and discussions right under our noses. Start using your mind. Wake up. See the truth. Let us take a further look into the people who formed the United Nations, the people behind them, the principles they rule by. Let us connect the history of the Vatican and the United Nations.
King Solomon is the single most important figure in the occult teachings of world international Freemasonry. The ancient Goetia is a book of powerful invocations and spells written by King Solomon. These ancient spells and evocations were used to summon spirits who were then psychically tortured and forced to serve King Solomon. The Goetia contains descriptions of 72 demons, some of whom control their own army of lesser demons. King Solomon ruled ancient Israel from the year 970 to 928 BC. Satanists, occultists, and Freemasons worldwide venerate the memory of King Solomon, who owned a magic ring engraved with a symbol called the Seal of Solomon. This gave him power over the invisible monarchy of demons. This Seal of Solomon is better known as the Star of David. In medieval Britain, Dr. John Dee was consulted regularly by Queen Elizabeth I. At the British Museum in London, we see the dark mirror which John Dee used to see or scry the faces of spirits. Dee's ability to communicate with spirits led him to be employed as a spy, developing psychic espionage techniques, which we now call remote viewing. John Dee attended Trinity College in Cambridge. Intertwined. Aleister Crowley also attended Trinity College. In 1904, he wrote an introduction to an ancient book of spells called the Goetia. Soon after, Aleister Crowley followed the footsteps of John Dee and worked as a spy for Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service, MI5.
Pike was the sovereign pontiff of universal Freemasonry and a known Satanist who possessed a bracelet which he used to summon Lucifer. He published the Masonic handbook known as Morals and Dogma. Albert Pike was also the author of a military formula for 3 world wars that would advance the world government agenda to its final stage in the 21st century. World War I, said Pike, must be engineered to overthrow the Tsars of Russia and make Russia a fortress of atheistic communism. World War II must be engineered to destroy Nazism, strengthen political Zionism, and create a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. World War III must exploit the conflicts between the Zionist state of Israel and the Islamic states so that they mutually destroy each other.
So they wanted to create this ordo ab chaos, this order out of chaos. Orthodoxism had to be subjected to Rome. Protestantism had to be eradicated. The Protestant nations were cut out, and enforced atheism was subjected and forced upon them for the over 80 years of the rule of communism. And once that religion had been watered down to non-existence, the plug was pulled out under communism. And these 3 wars that were to be fought were to bring it about. Now, here in the United States, they brought the Statue of Liberty. According to UNESCO itself, the Statue of Liberty, this is UNESCO writing its own word book. The 7 sun rays emanating from Mitra's halo symbolize his triumph over the forces of darkness. Now remember that in the occult, the forces of darkness represent Jesus Christ. The throne in the north, the throne of God, is in darkness. The Latin text is a dedication by fellow priest to Sextus Pompeius Maximus, Roman period. The head of the Statue of Liberty, I'm quoting from UNESCO document here, is adorned with Mitra's 7 rays, and the flame she holds is also a sun symbol. So the same symbol that fired the French Revolution, the Jacobin hat, is the symbol of the United States. That's scary. That's scary. The Statue of Liberty, if you look at its base, there is its cornerstone. Do you recognize the symbol on it? It was Masonically laid. It was a Masonic gift to the United States by France, transferring the heart of the philosophy to the United States. They knew it would take time to ferment and reach fruition, which it is now rapidly doing. But this has been their aim from the very beginning. In the Second World War, these were the main movers and shakers. Everybody knows who these 3 individuals were. They were Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin. Vladimir Lenin was a Grand Orient Lodge member. Winston Churchill, a 33-degree Freemason, and here you can see him photographed in his Druid Order Lodge. Now, we all know that the Druids have nothing to do with Christianity, but are a pagan society who, worship the other one. There he is, photographed in his Druid Lodge, and Joseph Stalin himself, Grand Orient Lodge. All the quotes are there for those who wish. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, one of the photographs of indiscretion, here photographed in his full Masonic regalia, and here also photographed with Myron Taylor giving the Masonic handshake in his full Shriner gear.
The name United Nations was coined by United States President Franklin D. Roosevelt and was used in the Declaration by United Nations of January 1942 during the Second World War, when representatives of 26 nations pledged their governments to continue fighting together against what they called the Axis powers. The forerunner of the United Nations was the League of Nations, and this was an organization in similar circumstances during the First World War and established in 1919 under the Treaty of Versailles to promote the international cooperation and to achieve peace and security. This comes straight from the UN webpage, so nothing strange about that. It's just plain history. Some more from that. In 1945, representatives of 50 countries met in San Francisco at the United Nations Conference on International Organizations, and they drew up a United Nations Charter. Now, let's have a look at this Charter of the United Nations. This is a very interesting piece of history. Well, Arthur Balfour, do you remember that name? We've used it before. Who was a member of Hort's Apostles? You remember Hort? This was the professor that helped to produce the Greek text that changed the emphasis of the Bible and removed many of the aspects of Jesus Christ's power and sovereignty from the Word of God. And the apostles were the secret society that functioned and at that time, and Hort was a member as well as Arthur Balfour. Hort called this group a Senior Apostles Club, as well as president of the Psychic Research Society, Society for Psychic Research, soon became Prime Minister of England, Arthur Balfour, and instrumental in the First League of Nations. So this Prime Minister was also, of course, active in the writing of the original Charter of the League of Nations, much of which formed the basis for the United Nations. He not only headed the Society for Psychic Research, holding seances at his home, but he initiated a group called the Synthetic Society, whose goal was to create a one-world religion. That's a very interesting point of history. And he invited a certain Frederick Mayers of the Society of Psychic Research to join, and together they created the preamble of all religions, and it includes the dogma, departed spirits can communicate. It was Hiss and Joseph E. Johnson, who later became secretary of the Bilderbergers, so here we have all the secret societies again, who wrote much of the United Nations Charter. So very high Freemasons, Bilderbergers, were responsible for this charter. Now we know what they believe. It's very interesting. So the Constitution of the USSR is almost identical to the Constitution of the United Nations, for those who did not know that. Winston Churchill, the creation of an authoritative world order is the ultimate aim towards which we must strive, and the United Nations formed part of that. Charles de Gaulle, who was also instrumental, nations must unite in a world government or perish. Now, U Thant, he was, of course, one of the earliest Secretary Generals. He said, world federalists hold before us the vision of a unified mankind living in peace under a just world order. The heart of the program, a world under law, is realistic and attainable. Just to remind you of what we have said before. And of course, behind the scenes, always you have the papacy. As you can see in all of these lectures, the papacy always very heavily involved. Here is Pope Paul VI with Secretary General U Thant. Now this man was a Marxist. Paul VI wrote a papal encyclical that called on the nations to abandon sovereignty to form a world government. So the Pope himself was behind this and actually called for such a government. About the spiritual aspect, there's one interfaith organization that is called the Temple of Understanding. And it has a newsletter which is called World Goodwill Newsletter. Founded by Juliet Hollister in 1960, the Temple of Understanding has one of its goals, the creation of a spiritual United Nations. In its work to promote understanding between religions on the basis of the oneness of the human family. Sounds good. The Temple has numbered among its members and supporters such influential world servers as U Thant himself. Well, there's the Secretary General, you can't go much higher than that. Eleanor Roosevelt, that's interesting. Thomas Merton, Jawaharlal Nehru, Anwar Sadat, Radhakrishnan, in addition to the main center of New York. So these are the top movers. So this is not some sort of little organization operating somewhere in the wings. This is a hub organization. And from where did they operate? Well, they were based at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. Philip Jessup, a CFR member, World Court Justice, pretty high up people, writes, "I agree that national sovereignty is the root of all evil." So nations will obviously have to relinquish their sovereignty to this organization without it appearing as if they're doing so. The Humanist Manifesto 2 states, "We deplore the division of mankind on nationalistic grounds. We have reached a turning point in human history where the best option to transcend the limits of national sovereignty and to be moved towards building a world community." That's Humanist Manifesto 1 and 2. These are the official documents. One could tell several moving stories, writes Robert Miller, the spiritual godfather, if you like, of the United Nations and the former Under-Secretary General. One could tell several moving stories of the spiritual transformation of the United Nations as caused to the point that this little speck on earth is becoming holy ground. For example, the rational intellectual economist Dag Hammarskjöld found God at the United Nations and inspiration for his work as a world servant in the mystics of the Middle Ages. Oh, there you are, the words of the United Nations themselves, or their representatives, telling us how this inspiration came about. Now let's go back a little bit to Foster and Alice Bailey. These were Alice A. Bailey, the one who received dictated messages from Dwal Kul, and who is known as the prophetess of the New Age. They started a group called World Goodwill, an official non-governmental organization within the United Nations. The stated aim of this group is to cooperate in the world of preparation for the reappearance of the Christ. So the United Nations, in other words, is an organization preparing to get all the governments together, yes. But that is just on a political level. The agenda behind it is to bring all the religions together and to prepare it for the coming of Christ. Which Christ? Not Jesus Christ, but the cosmic Christ. All right, so that is the mover and the shaker of the philosophy of the United Nations. Robert Miller writes in World Core Curriculum the following. Now this is stunning. The underlying philosophy upon which the Robert Miller School, now what is the Robert Miller School? We'll have to come to that. Robert Miller School is the education program for the entire world as will be enforced by the United Nations. That's scary. Let's read on. The underlying philosophy upon which the Robert Miller School is based will be found in the teachings set forth in the books of Alice A. Bailey. Hello? The books of Alice A. Bailey were published originally by Lucifer Publishing Company, which, because of all the flack, they changed to Lucis Trust. Isn't that correct? The school is now certified as a United Nations associated school providing education for international cooperation and peace. Okay, this is big business. So the philosophy is based on Luciferian channeled writings preparing for the coming of Lucifer. And remember what they said. They were quite open about it. Alice A. Bailey claimed, evidence of the growth of human intellect along the needed receptive lines for the preparation of the New Age can be seen in the planning of various nations and in the efforts of the United Nations to formulate a world plan. From the very start of this unfoldment, 3 occult factors have governed the development of all these plans. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, founder of Theosophy, she was the forerunner, of course, of the Bailey books, and Theosophy was then taken over by Annie Ward Basant over here, and then taken over by Alice A. Bailey. And here is the great invocation that has to be read and learnt by every child in the future. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men, let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. But this Christ is not Jesus Christ. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men. Oh, how neat. It's so derogatory. The purpose which the masters know and serve. What arrogance. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. This is interesting. Which door is to be sealed where evil dwells? Well, if you know occult science, you'll know that they call light darkness and darkness light, and they say that Jesus is the evil one. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the founder of this movement, of which Alice A. Bailey became the high priestess, if you like, said Lucifer represents life, thought, progress, civilization, liberty, independence. Lucifer is the Logos, the serpent, the Savior. It is Satan who is the God of our planet and the only one. Then she talks about the Virgin, who is Satan and Lucifer at the same time, and the Holy Ghost, all wrapped in one. So whether you call him Isis or whether you call him Osiris, doesn't matter. Whether you call him Baal and Ashtoreth, doesn't matter. Two names. He always comes under two names, two principles. Alice A. Bailey, she succeeded Besant as leader of Theosophy. Her husband was a 32-degree Freemason and also, of course, part of co-masonry. There she is, priestess and prophetess of the New Age movement, who received these messages from this spirit entity, which has to be a demon, Dwal Kor. Share International says, but the day will dawn when the vision of the United Nations will save the world, and when the reality of the United Nations starts bearing fruit, then the breath of immortality will be a living reality on earth. And there is the spiritual leader of or the present priest, if you like, in the United Nations, the Hindu Sri Chinmoy. He says the United Nations is the way to oneness that leads to the supreme oneness, capitalized. It is like a river flowing towards the source, the ultimate source. And the United Nations becomes for us the answer to world suffering, world darkness, world ignorance. The inner vision of the United Nations is the gift supreme. And this will be realized no matter how many years it takes. As we have seen, the symbol of the United Nations is very similar to the old Hittite symbol, where you had in the center the face of the sun god, and now you just have a web, if you like, a spider's web, which is the symbol of Lucifer, and the encompassing earth. And of course, the laurel wreath was a symbol of all the ancient deities. So we find all for one, all together now, we are the world, was the 50th celebration of the United Nations. The New Age agenda was to merge God and nature. That's what Teilhard de Chardin, the father of the philosophy of the UN, said. We must become pantheistic, eradicate male-female distinction, world peace, nuclear disarmament, one world government, one world religion. The organizations leading up to this, the United Nations, of course, Council of Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, Bilderbergers, Gorbachev Foundation, and the Club of Rome. And they've already put up a constitution which is known as the Constitution for the Federation of Earth. So we already have a world constitution. Now, obviously, if you want to bring about a situation like that, you have to influence the education of the world so that the mindset and the thinking of people is changed. So education is a very important point. This comes straight from their own web pages. Wow, you cannot say this is hearsay. It comes straight from them, unol.org. The world will not change and find peace if there is not a new education. Utant, former Secretary General of the United Nations. We need a new education. The old one's no good. The former director of the World Health Organization, Dr. Brock Chisholm, of course that's also a United Nations organization, says, to achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men their individualism. That's kind of scary, don't you think? Loyalty to family traditions. Oh, that's even worse. National patriotism and religion's dogmas. Have a look again at this man, Robert Miller, philosopher, prophet of hope, top-level global statesman, and what a mighty man. He's the Chancellor of the University of Peace, created by the United Nations. He is the creator of what is known as the World Core Curriculum. That says everything. And he's known throughout the world as the father of global education. There are 29 Robert Miller schools around the world, more being established each year. World Core Curriculum earned him the UNESCO Peace Prize in 1989. He has recently drawn up a framework for world media coverage. What you see on your television is what you're supposed to see, not what you should see. What does he write about a World Core Curriculum? He says a World Core Curriculum might seem utopian today, but by the end of the year 2000, have we passed that? Yes. It will be down-to-earth daily reality in, what does it say there? All the schools of the world. Now, I believe you me. Another organization that's very important is UNESCO. And let's just look at UNESCO. It's a sub-organization of the United Nations. Julian Huxley is the former director of UNESCO. Some more. Skull and Bones member Archibald MacLeish wrote the UNESCO Constitution. So he must be an Illuminati member, as we saw in that lecture on the secret behind secret societies. So Freemasons helped create the organization, a fervent international MacLeish. He is associated with One Worldism. Here's another one. Niebuhr is UNESCO's co-founder, and he signed CIECOS. Now what does that mean? Which appeared in 1969, and they printed it in the New York Times then. What is CIECOS? These are the founders. It is the position of CIECOS that contraceptive services should be available to all, including minors, who should enjoy the same rights of free and independent access to contraceptive care as do others. It is the position of CIECOS that the use of explicit sexual material, sometimes referred to as pornography, can serve a variety of important needs in the lives of countless individuals. These are nice people up there in the United Nations. No wonder now it is forced curriculum at even junior schools to have explicit sexual details explained, all in the names of preventing sexual diseases. UNESCO explains, if UNESCO is attacked on the grounds that it is helping to prepare the world's people for world government, then it is an error to burst forth with apologetic statements and denials. Let us face it, the job of UNESCO is to help create and promote the elements of world citizenship. When faced with such a charge, let us by all means affirm it from the housetops. That's what UNESCO says itself. So they're not denying anything. Under Huxley's guidance, they prepared a guidebook for teachers. Now, I would like the parents to take a note. Everybody with little children, or have children with little children, take note. What is the United Nations Guidebook for Teachers? It says, reminds them that the destruction of a child's love of country and patriotism is the first step in educating that child for world citizenship. Now let's have a look at what the guidebook contains. Volume 5, page, on the opening page. In the classroom with children under 13 years of age, before the child enters school, his mind has already been profoundly marked, often injuriously by earlier influences, first gained, however dimly, in the home. Oh, that's interesting. So this must be changed. Who is putting these thoughts into the minds of children then? The parents. That must be changed. So UNESCO's aim is to change the mindset of your children, to turn it against any values that the parents might instill in the mind of that child. Now another organization comes in, this is called the Finhorn Organization, and they promote ecological health and prosperity. Have you heard much about ecology in the world today? Yes. Now, again, we have to find the links. You always have to do some detective work. Because Francis, this is Francis of Assisi, connected with nature, Pope John Paul II named him the patron saint of ecology. Now, St. Francis was the roommate of Ignatius Loyola, the Jesuit founder, just for interest's sake. It is on St. Francis Day that thousands of people flock to St. John the Divine, oh, how boring, Cathedral for the blessing of the bees. Also, occultist Robert Miller, that's now the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, former one, informs us that Francis has been declared patron saint of the United Nations. The Pope does it, the United Nations follows. Who's really in control? Now let's see what Finhorn is all about. Here we go. Their logo is the flame of Lucifer. They use occult symbols. They use the lotus flower. They talk about divinely ordinary, divinely human. So what are they saying? We're God, and God spoke to me. Now who's that God that speaks to them? Well, let's ask their spokesman. This is David Spangler. There's one of his books, Parent as Mystic, Mystic as Parent. So this is what your education is going to do to your kids. Do you know that? David Spangler, co-director, spokesperson for Finhorn community in northern Scotland. That's what he looks like today. Let's see what he says. He writes in the Reflections of Christ, the true light of Lucifer cannot be seen through sorrow, through darkness, through the rejection. The true light of this great being can only be recognized when one's own eyes can see with the light of the Christ, the light of the inner sun. Lucifer works within each one of us to bring us to wholeness. And as we move into the new age, which is the age of man's wholeness, they love that word, wholeness. Each of us in some way is brought to the point which are termed Luciferic initiation. The particular doorway through which the individual must pass if he is to come fully into the presence of his light and wholeness, Lucifer comes to give us the final gift of wholeness. So who are these people actually worshipping? Lucifer, directly. Lucifer prepares man in all ways for the experience of Christhood. Oh, we become Christ. And Christ prepares man for the experience of God. But the light that reveals to us the presence of the Christ, the light that reveals to us the path of Christ comes from Lucifer. He is the light giver. He is aptly named the morning star because it is his light that heralds for man the dawn of a greater consciousness. David Spangler. There he says it. They're waiting for a new economic order. Well, I'm not going to go into those details. We affirm that the economy of all nations is a seamless web. They want to join it together. And a new international economic order. That's World Goodwill Commentary. All there by itself. And we have this new civilization. And it was held at the Fairmont Hotel, Masonic Auditorium in San Francisco. Conference document says we are experiencing the birth of a first global civilization, a historic, timely, global initiative. 1995. And there it was. And they were ready for it. CIA, NATO, MI5, CRI, all of these have occult symbols in them, which we don't have to go into details. The Trilateral Commission, the 666. The 666 is in the Federal Reserve. SSS, that was the original sixth letter of the Greek alphabet. F is the sixth letter of our alphabet. This all spells 666. No human force will ever be able to destroy the United Nations. Very interesting. For the United Nations is not a mere building or a mere idea. It is not a man-made creation. This is Robert Miller speaking. Former Under-Secretary General of the United Nations. If it wasn't man-made, then who made it? Robert Miller. And this is very exciting. Dispatch magazine. Do not worry if not all religions will join the United Religions Organization. Many nations did not join the UN at the beginning, but later regretted it and made every effort to join. It was the same with the European community. It will be the case with the world's religions, because whoever stays out or aloof will sooner or later
So now that we understand the hidden agendas and deeper meanings, the spiritual rulers of the public political leaders, who are these politicians and bankers? Let us look for a moment at them now, and see how their deception, false flags, paid protests, propaganda, and depopulation tactics have continued for decades under the name of peace. The UN uses mainstream media networks, like CNN, to promote their propaganda. Just as it has been exposed recently how the elite have been using mainstream media to brainwash the masses and alter perceptions and beliefs for decades. CNN is owned by Time Warner, which is owned by J.P. Morgan Chase & Company and Dodge & Cox Inc., to name a few. It also has a select group of direct holders, like Jeffrey Bezos, who sits in the head office of Time Warner's 2 towers built in 2001. Buildings purposely built to resemble the World Trade Centers of New York City, which were destroyed by the American government and Israel as a ritual sacrifice. And as we see today, like the phoenix rose from its ashes, so the towers today are raised in light. Bezos is also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, which is headed and funded by the Rothschild and Rockefeller families. The large majority of mainstream media network owners are all members of the CFR as well as the Trilateral Commission. Another Time Warner chairman is Richard Parsons, who is currently on the board of trustees and is a senior advisor to the Rockefeller Foundation. The list goes on and on. When you get into the upper levels of power, they are all Freemasons, members of these Masonic clubs, whatever name they go by. It is a web, all connected and twisted together. It is all the same, just different names. Again, CNN is owned by Time Warner Corp., used by the United Nations to produce propaganda to brainwash you with. Just like the government, CNN is owned by a number of individuals and corporations that are run by a few families. We call them the elite. These same elite families created the United Nations and have been using them to depopulate, control, destroy, and enslave us all. They are Satanists with the agenda of the world in total control under them, and their god Lucifer. That is why in every circle of power you will find rituals, human sacrifices, and pedophilia. This is what it takes to be a Satanist and a member of the elite. Ever wonder why the shootings and hoaxes have so many matching numbers, such as 3s and 6s and so on? It is because the media is scripted by the Freemason elite who live by satanic rituals which involve symbols, signs, and the rest that we have discussed. So the United Nations was created by the satanic banking families. Let us look at a bit.
In the aftermath of World War I, a powerful group of internationalists offered humanity a solution to the ravages of war: collective security through world government. The most prominent advocate of this plan was United States President Woodrow Wilson. The League of Nations, he proposed, would enforce peace by threatening to use collective force against individual aggressors. The U.S. membership, the League was doomed. In response, the League's internationalist sponsors decided to found the Council on Foreign Relations. Based in New York City, this private group's purpose would be to lay the groundwork in America for world government. While gaining control within the U.S. State Department during World War II, CFR members covertly worked towards establishing a successor to the League of Nations. The plans for the future United Nations were drafted by the Informal Agenda Group, a secret committee set up by Secretary of State Cordell Hull. The group was composed entirely of CFR members. At the UN's founding conference in San Francisco, 43 of the U.S. delegates, virtually the entire contingent, were CFR members. Commissioned by the U.S. State Department, a world effectively controlled by the United Nations directly states the key point.
It is world government we are discussing here, inescapable.
The author, MIT professor Lincoln P. Bloomfield, also explains that the UN would have to have an unchallengeable monopoly on military power.
A world effectively controlled by the United Nations is one in which world government would come about through the establishment of supranational institutions characterized by mandatory universal membership. National disarmament is a condition for effective UN control.
The Bloomfield study is grounded in official American policy. That policy is stated openly in Freedom from War. In the early 60s, European nations fell under intense international pressure to give up their colonies in Africa and prepare them for independence and self-rule. To hasten this process, the UN formed a committee on decolonization. Soon after, the U.S. joined with the USSR in support of a UN resolution authorizing the world body to send troops to the Congo. The UN troops were used to assist Lumumba, the chief terrorist, in his efforts to subjugate Katanga.
UN troops advancing from all sides systematically wipe out all resistance pockets, and in the process machine guns and bazookas killing many innocent civilians running for their lives to find cover from UN fire.
Smith Hempstone, African correspondent for the Chicago Daily News, witnessed the December 1961 UN attack on the capital of Katanga.
The UN jets next turned their attention to the center of the city. Screaming in at treetop level, they blasted the post office and the radio station, severing Katanga's communications with the outside world. One came to the conclusion that the UN's action was intended to make it more difficult for correspondents to let the world know what was going on.
46 doctors of Elizabethville, Belgian, Swiss, Hungarian, Brazilian, and Spanish, fired off telegrams to the UN pleading for a ceasefire. Later, they unanimously issued a joint report indicting the UN for atrocities against innocent civilians.
The United Nations operation in the Congo did not just help re-establish order and peace. More importantly, it provided all-around technical assistance to help build the infrastructure of a brand new country.
The residents of Katanga undoubtedly had a less enthusiastic view. The decolonization campaign also impacted the United Nations itself. As new pro-Soviet nations were invited to join, the UN General Assembly became more anti-American. The composition of the UN Security Council was also affected by the shift to a less free world. The 1975 edition of the Guinness Book of World Records reports that the greatest massacre in human history ever attributed to any nation is that of 26,300,000 Chinese during the regime of Mao Zedong between 1949 and May 1965. Admission of Communist China into the UN would have made a mockery out of the UN Charter and the UN's image as an organization dedicated to promoting human rights. Still, in 1971, the UN General Assembly voted to admit Mao Zedong's Red China into the UN and ousted nationalist Free China. Great jubilation ensued among the delegates. In 1989, the world caught a glimpse of the brand of justice that the Red regime dispenses as communist troops massacred peaceful pro-freedom demonstrators in Tiananmen Square. On Beijing's Avenue of Eternal Peace, many were crushed under armored vehicles. In 1975, the revolutionary Khmer Rouge captured the capital of Cambodia and took control of the nation. In less than 4 years, this group of Cambodian communists were responsible for the death of as much as 1/3 of Cambodia's population. UN spokesmen frankly admit that the UN did nothing to stop the genocide. However, the Khmer Rouge were supported by the major communist states, states which often engineer terrorism and support the violent overthrow of established governments, and which from the beginning have been members in good standing at the UN. Yasser Arafat brandished a pistol in front of the UN General Assembly as he was given a standing ovation by the so-called peace organization. A 1959 Gallup poll reported that 87% of the American people thought the UN was doing a good job. But by 1980, Gallup reported that only 31% felt the UN was doing a good job. Resistance to the globalist agenda was also felt on Capitol Hill. Between 1975 and 1982, Congress received petitions with over 11 million signatures calling for the United States to withdraw from the United Nations. But the battle had just begun. Paved the way for national governments to surrender any political power to the UN. Globalists need more than just a plausible pretext such as solving a crisis. They must also create the appearance of popular support for their plans. For several decades, the UN CFR Axis has been organizing non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, into a force that it calls Global Civil Society. This NGO movement has been developed by the CFR strategist as a deniable asset, for the NGOs must appear to be spontaneous and independent of the power structure. The plan to disarm civilians has been part of the earliest plans to disarm nation-states. The motive is simple. If no nation is allowed the military power to challenge UN authority, then no private citizen or group should be able to resist that authority either. In the 1990s, the UN itself began to take a much more visible lead in this movement. In the UN presentation, Armed to the Teeth, the campaign for civilian disarmament is packaged as a response to a new threat. Suddenly, a global plague of small arms threatens world peace.
The small arms crisis is so acute that the United Nations now considers it one of the gravest challenges facing the world.
This UN propaganda aims to persuade viewers that they will be better off, safer, if they allow government to take away their means to defend themselves. Revolutionary strategists have long recognized that a crisis can facilitate a major change in political arrangements. Among the useful crises, war, or the threat of war, has always topped their list. The threat of environmental catastrophe is still another crisis being used to persuade Americans to accept a revolution in world political arrangements. Convened under the pretext of saving planet Earth from environmental destruction, the 1992 UN Earth Summit was a major watershed event for the globalist agenda. The summit put governments on notice that major changes were needed in economic agendas and in our institutions of governance. The Earth Summit gathering was designed to give the illusion of planetary democracy at work. Delegates labored over details of language, while the NGOs lobbied outside for tougher measures. In fact, the principal programs to come out of Rio had already been worked out well in advance by the CFR brain trusts.
At virtually all of the UN summits, for instance, you will see so-called representatives of indigenous peoples. You always see these same representatives miraculously showing up at these summits. They were going to come there to represent the people of their jungle or of their rainforest or of their mountain tribe. In virtually every case, they are there repeating the phrases that have been fashioned for them by these same NGO leaders who are promoting the UN line.
At the dawn of the 21st century, the United Nations announced specific plans to implement such a court. Proponents suggested that the demand for an ICC simply welled up in the UN General Assembly. But the Council on Foreign Relations was clearly pulling the strings.
The Council on Foreign Relations' hand was very evident in the preparatory meetings for the ICC. I was at the Los Angeles conference, and Ambassador David Sheffer, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, was the keynote speaker. The chairman of the event there was also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, as were many of the other prominent people in attendance. In addition, we see that the legal scholars like Richard Falk and others who are putting together the actual documents themselves, hammering out the wording, are also members of the Council on Foreign Relations.
In 1998, the UN convened a conference in Rome to hammer out a treaty that would establish the court. Much like the Nuremberg trials dealt with Nazi officials after World War II, proponents say the ICC will provide an impartial international venue to try tyrants and other assorted threats to world peace. In Rome, a widely read NGO publication reminded conference attendees where world justice was needed most. The primary target of condemnation by both the NGOs and the delegates was the United States. The Rome Statute claims jurisdiction for the ICC to try any individual charged with genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and aggression. However, no reasonable consensus was reached at the Rome Conference concerning the definition of these crimes. Their definition will be left to the arbitrary interpretation of ICC judges. To transform much of the United States into wild lands habitat, millions of Americans would be relocated and miles of roads would be declared off limits. the very right to own property would be restricted and eventually abolished altogether. All law enforcement officers would fall under control of a global UN police force. Local police would exist to serve and protect the state, not the citizens. And the entire American military would fall under the command of the UN as part of the world's most powerful force, UN peacekeepers. Their prime objective? To suppress any opposition.
The New World Order wants to create a world currency, a world government, a world army, a world religion. And it's not of Christ, of Buddha, it's not of the Muslim faith, it is a satanic order.
Our institutions of freedom have lain dormant. The United Nations can offer them new life. These institutions play a crucial role in our quest for a new world order.
Their agenda is control. Control of our currency, control of our families, of our freedoms, of our religions. They want it all. There's nothing that you have, or ever had, or ever hope to have that they're not planning to taking away. They want it all. But it's Novus Ordo Seclorum, the New World Order. It's what Hitler envisioned. It's on the backside of the United States dollar bill. The eye of the pyramid, also called the eye of Horus, is the eye of Lucifer. This is what we are facing. The New World Order is housed right here at the United Nations. It is global government. Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. One world, one race, one ruler. It's what Rudolf Hess talked about when he introduced Adolf Hitler. This is Hitler's dream come true. This is a nightmare. This is the tombstone upon all sovereignty for all nations for all time. The United Nations must fall for freedom to live.
Our institutions of freedom have lain dormant. The United Nations can offer them new life. These institutions play a crucial role in our quest for a new world order.
Today there are many agendas in place. We are quite well into the New World Order. There are quite a number of events the United Nations is involved in currently, and as we have exposed some of it to you previously, we will continue to in future videos as well. We will look into a few of these plans forming now.
This is a moral calling. In just 2 months, the world has an opportunity to unite around a strong global agreement. I saw President Hollande walk in a few moments ago. We are going to be converging in Paris. With his leadership and the leadership of every world leader, we need to establish the tools and financing to help developing nations
move forward together as one in a renewed spirit of fraternity and solidarity, cooperating generously for the common good.
And all these agendas that we are seeing, they are all linked together. I recently uncovered, and it didn't take much, it was just going to a meeting, but I was able to prove that the U.S. government is carrying out the mega regions plan.
First of all, it's great to be in Long Beach, California, in the Southern California mega region.
So one of the things you want to look at with this particular mega region is that you're projected to almost a 62% growth rate by 2050. That's a lot more people.
Those are the prison cities that they're going to force all of us to live in. That proves the conspiracy of forcing people off rural land. First, they got to force you into the city, then they'll have their global police network to enforce whatever laws they decide to come up with. So I want to make the correlation that this is not just some single agenda going on, this is a multitude of agendas. They throw everything against the wall and hope some of it sticks. And that's what I think a lot of this is. We can stop this. This doesn't have to happen. all you have to do is get off your ass and start keeping your local elected leaders in check. Find out what they are doing. And that's what it says right here. It says, it is clear that the challenge of building resilience against violent extremism, a challenge that spans vast oceans and borders while impacting our most tightly knit cities and towns. And the key word there is resilience. But what I want to say first is this. We see this already. They are doing the exact same thing with this. They are bringing in all these Muslims from around the world. They're going to shove them into high-density apartment buildings that are sitting empty right now. And then because they bring in all these Muslims who might be extremists, well, we got to have a world police force to make sure that nothing happens, and it's for our safety. So that's what this is. You do not have to let the Muslims into your country. You can stop this. Like I said earlier, you just got to get off your ass and find out what's going on in your local area. Resilient cities thing that they are talking about. So it says the challenge of building resilience. And resilience is Agenda 21. This is the Rockefeller Foundation website. And these things are all tied together. And so here's your country right here. This is your country if you are an American. But this map right here, this didn't exist. You were a conspiracy theorist if you brought up the Mega Regions Plan, which is known as the America 2050 Plan. But now, the Department of Transportation, they are now rolling out this exact plan. So it's all elementary. It's all problem, reaction, solution. They are creating the problem. The problem they are creating is they are making these controlled city centers. They are bringing in potential terrorists. And then because they're bringing in the potential terrorists, well, they got to bring in a global police force for your safety. So remember, this agenda, this strong cities agenda, this is the police force that's going to be patrolling these cities. And the last thing that I will show you is this document right here from the U.S. Army. Mega cities and the U.S. Army. And it's about how in the future, the U.S. Army will be patrolling these cities. These giant control grids will be under martial law, and they are going to use a technocracy, fusion centers, smart grids, to keep track of everything.
The United Nations is what the member governments hope will become a singular world government, working with the Vatican. They have the same agenda and goal. They are all on the same team. The United Nations, as they see it, will be a one government for the earth, with Lucifer as the ruler, based on peace, prosperity and protecting individual rights, and many other things that sound very nice. They are master deceivers. That is what they do. Pay attention and know the hidden meanings. Learn what the terms they use really mean. It does not take much imagination. Remember, they hate you. They want you dead. Your suffering makes them laugh. They slaughter hundreds, thousands, as blood offerings. Ritual human sacrifices to Lucifer. False flag attacks. Holidays. Festivals. They kill you for him. And they laugh at you, because you support it. They create religions for you and laugh, because you believe lies and obey them. They create holidays and sports and concerts and Olympic Games, all satanic cult rituals. They display all of these things openly, and you participate. You support it. You spend your money on it. You spend your time on it. And worst of all, you spend your mind on it. With what we spend our mind on, let us be wise indeed, for it is spent quite easy. Be careful how you feed. When we stop watching them, they roam free. Stay vigilant. Be diligent. We do not fight against princes and principalities, but against the forces of evil. The truth will set you free. Expect it.